Well, Jason, it looks like I currently have a Revelry Imperial Red Ale. So cheers to that. Two brothers in
Two
Warrenville,
brothers.
Illinois,
Excellent.
as we are also in the Chicagoland area, right?
Okay.
And what do you got over there?
I've got from Wild Onion Brewery the Stay Puffed Brown Ale infused with marshmallow. It's quite good. I just had my first sip of it. I like these. It's not quite as heavy as a stout, so that's an excellent way to approach these like super flavorful beers that you're not going to drink a lot of.
Stay puffed, indeed.
So I have like half of one of these, and then in a little while we're going to crack open this fantastically awesome label. It's called Double Beezer with a B from OIB. I don't know that. Old Irving Brewing. Is this? Are they? I wonder. So they're on Montrose in Chicago. I wonder if that's in the brewery triangle up in Ravenswood, where they have Half Acre and I forget some of the other ones that we went to. But it's a great little area full of breweries.
Well, we talked about doing these shows on location at some point, although a couple of years ago would have been a much better time than it is currently in this climate. So maybe in a couple of years from now we can do that again.
Yeah, at best we're going to do it on location from your studio.
One of our one of our houses. Yeah,
exactly.
But what's going on for tonight's show? Can you tell the people out there what we have to offer?
So tonight we will be taking a peek back at last week, what we talked about. We were talking about player trends last week, players trending up, players trending down. We're just going to check in and see how we did on that. And then we will talk about waiver pickups for the week. That'll pick up the bulk of the show. Towards the end of the show, Dave is going to touch in on some of the Fantasy Fool's Gold that he's been giving you almost every week for the entire season. And then at the very end of the show, we're going to give you the players that you need to cut. So diving right in, last week we did talk about players trending up, trending down. I covered the players trending up, and perhaps that's an easier thing to do because, when it's good, it's great. And when they look good, it makes you look good. So I had James Robinson. Last week he had 107 yards from scrimmage. No touchdowns, but I think he'll be fine. He had 21 total touches. Are you at all worried about James Robinson going forward, Dave?
Not really, but what matters is the Jaguars themselves and their football team, and if they're able to keep it together. Do we trust in Gardner Minshew, which is like a weekly a hero or folly situation with Minshew? And I think that regardless of what happens there, he's clearly the guy they're going to continue to depend on in the backfield. And isn't that really what matters the most for fantasy purposes?
I agree.
So yeah, I think he's going to be good no matter what. But if there are major issues with Jacksonville, which there still could be, it's not a 100% fact that Minshew is going to carry out through the end of this football season, for example.
Sure. I mean, we're all touched with a little bit of Minshew mania, some of us more than others.
I don't know if I've been affected by the Minshew.
We'll see what happens. Jerick McKinnon, last week, 19.2 points, continues his upward trend. 7 receptions was very nice. He scored another touchdown. As long as the main guys are out for the 49ers, I don't see McKinnon stopping. Justin Jefferson, a guy that you are having a ball with in the Dynasty League, 12.3, went over 100 yards again, 4 catches on 5 targets. A-plus matchup this week in Seattle. Justin Jefferson is remaining in your starting lineup, I hope?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and that also depends on other variables. But I think in general that Justin Jefferson right now is performing out of the box.
Well, based on your record, I doubt you have like 3 studs at wide receiver.
Based on my record?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think I'm 2-2 there. I'm not like
are you?
in the deep mud or anything. This guy, he's trying to push me down.
I'm trying to bring him down to my level.
No, to your
the 1 and 3s.
To your point, a great dynasty prospect who's excelling over what you thought he could do, right, at this point. So he is on my lineup probably as a WR3. I just don't know. I can't recall because I have so many leagues where I currently have
Well, I've got it up. So if we just look at a sample here, along with Jefferson, you've got Fuller, Deontay Johnson, and Allen Robinson. Very good on you for already setting your lineup for next week.
Well, I do that Monday night.
On the bench, you've got Michael Gallup, who I like, but isn't necessarily a start. Russell Gage, who had a really rough week this week. Crowder, Watkins, Chris Godwin, he'll be out for another week. Mike Williams, he's out. A.J. Brown is out. You've got a hell of a wide receiver group on this team, Dave.
Yeah, but a lot of them aren't playing right now. As you mentioned. But I think Allen
Therefore,
Robinson.
Justin Jefferson.
I think Allen Robinson, Deontay Johnson, and Justin Jefferson is what I have currently. So those guys will probably stick.
Fair enough. That sounds like a plan.
Yeah, I do love him. I love him. Why not? And if you're in a redraft league, it's a little bit less of a love because rookies are so much more variable, I would say.
Right.
But from what he's doing on that team, and I know you're going to talk about Kirk Cousins a little bit later too, kind of coming out of his shell maybe, then we have a lot going on in Minnesota.
He's blossoming a bit. Spoilers. Keenan Allen is the last trending up player. He had 10.2 points, 12 more targets. This week he was more of a possession receiver because he only had 62 yards on 8 catches, so that's a low average. However, clearly he's Herbert's favorite. As I said last week, don't worry about starting Allen. He's a stud, and as we've said for years and years, start your studs. So the trending down guys that Dave wanted to point out, whether to temper your expectations or to say don't worry about them. Lamar Jackson put up 26 points last week, 3 total touchdowns, had the longest run of his career. So I think he's going to be fine. Unfortunately, for the people who drafted Lamar Jackson, I assume as the first quarterback off the board, he is not putting up the numbers that Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott are putting up.
I mean, the top
not even close.
5 or 6 or 7 quarterbacks. And what we talked about last week was, Washington was a really good opportunity for, I think, Lamar Jackson to get his footing back. And a lot of those points came from that long run, of course.
Sure, that's like 11 points, a 50-yard touchdown.
Otherwise, it would have been.
Which I assume it was a touchdown.
It would have been a much less reasonable showing for Jackson. But still, and I think you said this earlier, it doesn't really bode well for the Ravens across the season that he's not putting up 30-point games. You drafted him in rounds 1 or 2 or 3 if you were lucky, and he is not putting up points specific to that draft spot.
If you drafted him in round 3, he's probably not killing you. But if you drafted him in round 1 or 2, that means that's a top-end running back or wide receiver that you don't have.
Right.
So also to go along with Lamar Jackson was Marquis Brown. He bounced back this week with 10.6 points, 86 total yards. He had 8 targets. That's the most of the season. However, he needs to improve his catch rate. This season, he is at 61%, which is not he is kind of a downfield guy, but it's less than it was last year, and last year was a rookie year. You need to improve from your rookie year if you're going to be a staple of the offense.
Yeah, I was just looking into where the ADP was for Marquis Brown. I think we talked about this last week, and it looks like he overall was an 8th round ADP, and if his best game was 10 points, then he is not doing well for you.
So that was his best, his most targets. I don't know if that was his best game.
I think he had like 8, 5, and 3 points.
He had 101 yards in game 1.
Okay.
And 5 catches. So that would have been his best fantasy game. But none of them have made you want to start him on a weekly basis.
Point is, I think the matchup has given them a little bit of life and juice, but they're going right back to tough opponents for the next couple of games.
Yep. So the guy with the opposite of that, easy opponents coming up, Kenyan Drake. He did only have 3.5 fantasy points, only 35 yards on 13 attempts, no targets in the passing game, did not break the trend as it was predicted. So I think he can do better against the Jets. And then the following week he plays the Cowboys. They just gave up 300 yards on the ground. So do you think that Kenyon Drake could be a buy low target? Because he's going to play well. Sorry, he has great matchups the next 2 weeks.
I'm very conflicted on this, and we could have an entire show about Kenyon Drake. I just don't think you'd want to do it.
No, I don't want to do that show.
But look, it's very interesting. I saw on Reddit there's a community. I was going to say great community, but I don't agree with that. It's just a community called Our Fantasy Football. Mostly it's not great, but there are some really good.
There aren't many that are great.
Fair point. There are some good people putting content into that subreddit, and one of the people I just saw, and I wish that I had his information and a link so I could send it to everybody. I can look it up afterwards. But he had compared Kenyon Drake to Chase Edmonds, to David Johnson, and those stats in all sorts of different categories. And what we find is that for whatever reason, this particular year, they are not targeting Kenyon Drake in the passing game, and they're trying to run between tackles in a way that Kenyon Drake has never been good at. They're not doing the things that they did at the end of last year that made him so successful. They're not giving him the ball in space. They're giving it to Edmonds instead of Drake in certain circumstances. This is one of those things where fantasy football team managers look at their lineup and they look at their players and they say, like, did Kenyon Drake, did he do something his wife. What happened?
What Kenyan Drake needs is like the Chris Carson blackmail material.
Yeah. So I do agree 100% that he could come back, but at this point, I have Kenyan Drake in a lineup, for example. I'm not going to play him until I'm not going to dump him, but I'm not going to play him until he shines some kind of light on.
You don't need to start him against the Jets.
I'm not going to start him at all until the guy scores 8, 9, 10 points.
Okay. One more. Just a heads up to everybody who's listening live, get your shot glasses ready.
That's right.
So we got one more trending down player was Robbie Anderson, but he's fine. Let's be honest. He started out from a very high mountain and sort of trended back to the pack. But last week he put up another 13.9 points. I think that he'll be just fine this year. His 11 targets last week was the most. 8 receptions was the second most. He just needs to find the end zone to be putting up the gaudy numbers that we know that he can sometimes do.
But what we were seeing was the trend also of Robbie Anderson and Teddy Bridgewater getting to know each other, taking walks on the beach, sharing their interests.
Okay.
Those kinds of things. And I think we've seen that
Are they in a book club together?
Yeah, that chemistry works. And now they don't mind being together for long periods of time and discussing books that they've recently read.
Fantastic.
And that, as we all know, translates into 67-yard touchdowns for Robbie Anderson.
All right. Okay, so that's it for the trending players. We're going to get to the waivers in just a moment. But first, we want to salute occasional Drink 5 contributor Vince Foss. It's his birthday tonight. Cheers to Vince. We will drink to him. Cheers.
OC Vince Foss. Cheers. I'm scared of this cheersing the shot glass over the equipment thing, but
you know what? It only went awry once, and it was over my laptop.
Cheers to everybody watching out there. So Vince, being the birthday boy that he is this evening, asks us what our thoughts on Robert Tanyan. And we're going to go into that because I assume he's one of the pickups on your waiver wire list.
Robert Tanyan is definitely one of the pickups on the waiver wire list this week.
So what if we jump to that, if you don't mind, and just go to tight ends first? Would that be okay?
Are we going to go backwards?
Yeah, let's go backwards.
Oh, this is fun.
Let's move backwards.
Okay, so we'll start with tight ends first. Robert Tanyan of the Green Bay Packers, the Green Bay Football Packers.
He kind of sounds like a Game of Thrones sort of guy, like the Tanyan.
He's from the north.
Yeah, exactly.
He is 31% owned in Flea Flicker leagues. So this year, we are switching our base of reference from Yahoo to Flea Flicker. If you don't use Flea Flicker, if you're unfamiliar with it, I highly recommend it as a site to host your fantasy football league. That being said, we're going to go with that. We're also going with the half-point PPR scoring this year. Anyways, Tanyan is 31% owned in Flea Flicker leagues. His FAAB value for suggested value this week for waiver claims, I say 10%, but as I bring up in a minute, you may need to pay a lot more depending on your league situation. So he's going to be on bye in week 5. You're not going to get anything out of him next week. So if you need someone for this week, he's not a great pickup. However, it looks like he's one of Aaron Rodgers' favorite targets. He has a touchdown in all 3 games this year. He had 3 touchdowns last week, along with 6 receptions, 98 yards. It was an amazing game from Tanyan that made me lose a fantasy game in a different league. So I can be a little bit salty about that, I suppose.
Sure.
I remember watching a play last night where the Falcons secondary literally tackled Tanyan while he was running his route, like 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. They just tackle him. He gets up and keeps running to the end zone, and then Aaron Rodgers throws it to him, and he scores a touchdown. They just could not do anything to stop what Aaron Rodgers was doing last night.
It was awesome, actually. I was speaking to a coworker earlier today who has spent a lot of time in Wisconsin, big fan of the Packers, and he mentioned that the thing that stuck out to me from our conversation was that he was just saying that Rodgers was having such a good time doing it. And I was watching the whole game, and he just had a grin on his face the whole time. There was one time when he kind of fell. He got tackled a little bit weirdly on his knee, and that was
like he stubbed his toe or something.
It's always scary for Packers fans or fantasy owners of Rodgers whenever something like that
or
happens.
Any Green Bay player, really. Like if Aaron Rodgers goes down, that whole team goes down.
No,
you don't need that.
Yeah, but he said he's just having such a good time, and he really was. And I think the Packers, we never thought that this would happen. Looking at last year into this year, we thought that Rodgers would kind of struggle on the the edge of QB1 status.
Because of the lack of wide receivers or just getting older or maybe not gelling.
But
with
apparently
the
it doesn't matter, and he's just a really good quarterback.
The Packers are the best team in the NFC through 4 weeks. I still would put them ahead of the Seahawks. The Seahawks have played well, but they've played several close games. The Packers games don't even feel that close. They're just dominating everyone they play, and it's because Aaron Rodgers does whatever he wants on the field.
Yeah.
With no fans in the stadium, Aaron Rodgers literally yelled hard count.
Yeah, how awesome is that?
And got Atlanta to jump off sides.
He literally...
That was awesome.
He tells them what's going on, and they fall for it because, oh, my goodness.
So there's not much this guy can't do. I know
fun.
that there are probably people outside egging my car because we are in Bears territory here. But what can I say? I'm an Aaron Rodgers fan. So, back to Robert Tanyan. He's going to be one of the hottest waiver pickups this week. So, he's not going to play next week. That may mean that a few people, it slips under their radar. But if you're in a league with big budgets, and those big budgets need tight ends, then you're going to need to probably double that FAAB to like at least 20% to have a shot at landing him. If you really need him, I would suggest going even higher. But if you've already got a tight end and you just want to shore it up or have a flex guy, 20% is reasonable in my opinion. So when the Packers return, even when Devontae Adams is back, I expect Tanyan to be a relevant tight end one for the rest of the season.
These are rough things to predict going forward because of the fact, like you said, about Adams. But I will say this. With Marquis Valdes-Scantling not really performing to a high level, even though he was finally here in the last 2 weeks thrust into the spotlight where he should, I feel, have really stepped up, it's clear to me that Rodgers cannot depend on him, and so he's going to move in other directions. So I agree with you that if there's no Lazard, it's going to be Tanyan. It's going to be Tanyan and Adams for the rest of the season. Okay. Now, the only one thing that I want to bring up is that he had both hamstring and ankle injuries over the past couple weeks. So I'm not sure that this guy, Tanyan, has really prepared for this kind of a career in receiving.
Sure, it's going to be... Well, let's see what happens.
But we do know he's a good friend of George Kittle's, so George Kittle will slap the sense into him and say, I don't care if you're injured. Get out there and catch touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers, man.
Right. Like, George Kittle's be like, I have to play with Nick freaking Mullins.
That's right.
And Beathard.
You have Rodgers.
At best, I get Garoppolo. So Nelson in the chat room wants to know about Danny Amendola or Darnell Mooney for week 6.
That seems like slim pickings, man.
I have to say we've never got a question like that before.
For week 6?
Week 6 schedule.
Wow.
Give me a reminder. Who the hell is Darnell Mooney?
Mooney's a Bears receiver. He's the one that.
Okay, don't start him. Just start Danny Amendola.
He's the one that Foles has been targeting quite a lot, actually more than you would think. For whatever reason. Oh, I know the reason.
So the Bears play the Rams on Sunday Night Football that week. Monday Night Football that week. And the Rams have a good secondary because it's led by Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, but Jalen Ramsey's not going to be covering Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, but the Lions and Danny Amendola are going to play the Falcons. The game in which we will decide the unstoppable force versus the immovable object when it comes to giving up leads in football games.
Well, let's just the reason why he brings up the question at all, but week 6 is a little rough right now. But Mooney had 9 targets last week, 5 targets the week before that. He's had a touchdown this season. He's performed better overall than Amendola has, definitely. And Anthony Miller, it looks like he's doing nothing out there. He's a guy that's actually, spoiler alert, on the cut list.
Ooh.
And so,
it's more of a teaser, I'd say.
And so I kind of like Mooney here. I'm going to be honest. I think that Mooney is emerging as a target that is someone who's shifty in that Bears offense, and they don't have a whole lot of wide receivers beyond Miller and Robinson, so he's moving up as that third guy. So that's who I would say, because Amendola has just not been impressive at all, and he's on a team where they have multiple targets above him that are bigger and more prevalent in the offense.
Yeah, I would say wait, and obviously you don't have to make the decision now, but
yeah, wait until next week.
See what happens with the Bears offense. If they put up another 3 points, you may consider going with Amendola, but based on that, I would agree with you that you would want to go with the Bears player against the Rams rather than the incredible suckfest that will be the Lions versus the Falcons.
Yeah, and at least it's a nationally televised game. That it'll be the Rams versus the Bears, right?
Yeah, Monday night.
So everyone kind of
Bears will
steps
get
up a little
two
bit.
national games in a row. They play on Thursday night this week.
We got Revise in the chat room says, should I sell high on Tanyan? I have Higbee. And I say yes, 100% yes, 100% yes. If it
depends on how high you can sell.
No, if a guy scores 3 touchdowns, he's never doing that again in the history of his career. And if you could sell him for like a wide receiver or running back, you could play the rest of the year, and you have Higbee, yes.
That's what I'm saying. It depends on how high you sell.
I guess
don't trade him for a random quarterback.
Right.
Trade him for someone who is better than someone you're already starting at running back or wide receiver.
Yeah, like it's difficult to tell you the absolute value. Of course, it depends on where your league is and how your scoring system works, etc. But in general, I would say if you can get like a wide receiver 2 or running back 2 for Tanyan, yes, is what I would say.
Great. So back to the waiver pickups. We got Dalton Schultz on Dallas, who you guys weren't listening the last 2 weeks when I told you about him. He's still only 49% owned. His FAAB bid, I recommend 8%. So he found the end zone for the second time this season. He is currently the tight end 8 after 4 games this year. Prescott is throwing the ball so effing much, more than anybody else in the league. There will be plenty of work for Schultz. He already has 28 targets this season, and there's not a lot of competition for his spot on the Cowboys depth chart. So as long as Dak keeps throwing the ball, which I expect he will because their defense is crap, then Schultz is going to be in the tight end 1 conversation just based on the volume he gets alone. We talk about volume a lot for running backs and wide receivers. This is a volume-based quarterback or tight end right here, where he's going to be valuable only because of that.
Yeah.
I mean, he can he can score once in a while, he can get some yardage, but when he goes 5 for 70 every week and may score a touchdown, that's startable. That's tight end 1 material. All right, back up to wide receivers. First wide receiver on my list is Cole Beasley of Buffalo. He is 44% owned. I recommend an 8% bid on him. So he's been very fantasy relevant this season because Josh Allen is awesome. So it's a really strong passing offense, and in offenses like that, there is room for 3 wide receivers to thrive. Not just be good, but thrive. This is one of those offenses this year. Beasley had 20 targets through the first 3 games. Last week, he got banged up and didn't play a bunch of the second half. He did come back towards the end of the game, but the injury came on an amazing leaping touchdown where he came down kind of awkwardly, but he held onto the ball. Beasley looks like a guy who has finally found a quarterback that he wants to play really hard for. You know, he had the whatever the Cowboys were throwing out there between Tony Romo and Dak Prescott, and he had, I forget where else he was, whatever they were doing in Buffalo before Josh Allen. So there was never a lot to be inspired by, but Josh Allen is an inspirational quarterback this year.
Well, I would say that Beasley's probably only going to get your 70, 75 targets over the course of the year, but he's a flex play, and if he's on the wire, needs to be owned. There's someone on your team who is worse.
Yes, absolutely.
So
That's a great way to put it.
Whether or not you start him, like, you need depth. You know, you need depth all the time. That's one of the things that I try to hammer in over and over. And I was just talking about rankings this earlier today on Twitter. And the most important thing is you might have a good starting lineup, but a lot of those teams that are 3-0 right now, 4-0 after this week, are not looking at their depth. They're like, I'm good. And you know what? As soon as 2 of those guys get injured or they start trending down, they have nobody, and those teams are going to drop down in the rankings, and suddenly that 4-0 team is going to be shitty.
You're right. That's how 4-0 3 teams become 4-3.
Always work on the depth. Bring up Cole Beasley. Put him on your squad.
Right. I totally agree. So just a real-world check here. The Bills play the Titans next week. They're scheduled to. The Titans currently have had 2 days with 0 COVID positives, which means that they need the 2 full days. Then they can open up the facility. Assuming that there's no complications come the morning, then the Titans will open the facility tomorrow. Assuming there's no more positive tests, then for sure they're going to play the game on Sunday. So you can keep an eye on that. I love Beasley as a guy you put on your roster. You throw him in when there's an injury ahead of you. You throw him in when there's a bye week replacement needed. You keep him around because he's the 3rd guy on this roster. If either Diggs or Brown goes down, Beasley's going to get more work.
Yeah.
So keep him around. Leviska Shenault on Jacksonville. We've been talking about him a couple times this season already. He is 47% owned. I recommend a 5% bid on him or so, not as much as Beasley. So he's a rookie. He's going to have growing pains like all rookies have. The Jaguars do want to get the ball in his hand, though. He has had at least 5 touches in every game this season, including a rushing attempt, at least one in every single game this season. So he's one of those gadgety players that can score from anywhere on the field, that they just want to put the ball in his hand and see what he can do. Last week he put up a season high of 91 yards from scrimmage. It was like a rush and a lot of receiving yards. The bigger worry is Minshew. We spoke about Minshew a little bit earlier. We don't need to get into him again. So really what happened is they surprised everyone by beating the Colts in week 1. And it turns out the Colts defense is actually really good. So we don't know why they beat them. It was probably just one of those week 1 flukes. And Jacksonville is probably actually the bad team that everybody thought they were. So this week they have to play Houston. Houston is fired up because finally Houston fired Bill O'Brien. There was definitely an awkward conversation between him and the GM when it came to firing him, I'm sure.
Good job, Houston.
Yes, very good job.
Nice work.
So right as I think Bill O'Brien stated after the game on Sunday that I'm going to be taking over play calling for the rest of the season. And the owner said, no, you're not. So Shenault is on the depth chart for the Jaguars behind Keelan Cole, and DJ Chark. And
bye-bye, D.D. Westbrook.
Yeah.
It was nice to know you.
Yeah, he's not at all relevant at all. So there are 5 players on this team with over 130 receiving yards already. Minshew does like to spread the ball around. So any changes in the depth chart are going to benefit Shenault because he'll move up a notch or 2. He is a touchdown away from a good performance any week because he's getting touches. So just like Cole Beasley, get him on your bench. There's someone on your bench that's worse than Leviska Shenault. Just because it's a weird name you haven't heard of before on the Jaguars doesn't mean he can't be relevant occasionally. So my favorite pickup this week at wide receiver, and this is a total dead giveaway for anyone who's listening live who is in a league that I'm in, because I will put a claim on this guy in every league he's available, is T. Higgins.
Tonight.
In Cincinnati.
And he's owned in a lot of leagues already.
I imagine that it's certainly in the dynasty leagues I'm in, he's going to be owned.
Yeah.
And in any of the deeper leagues in him, he's going to be owned.
We're talking about Tyler Boyd and AJ Green.
Green, wrong color.
and how Joe Burrow is doing over there with the offense and who he's throwing the ball to. And T. Higgins is going to be a star in this league, isn't he?
I think so. I am in love with what I've seen from T. Higgins so far.
He's in love with T. Higgins.
He's a huge player. And as Dave knows, and he constantly gives me crap on, I really fall in love with the players on shitty teams. And it happened once again with T. Higgins. I didn't realize it all day when I'm looking up, doing research on T. Higgins, and really saying, like, this guy is going to be great. He's going to be awesome in this league. And I have Joe Burrow on a dynasty league, so I'm just going to be biased for the rest of the career of him.
But you know, Burrow and Higgins can still be good even though the team isn't.
Correct.
And Mixon as well. It can happen and has happened in the past. So I'm with you on Higgins.
So he is 6'4". He runs faster than you would expect him to. He is an elite wide receiver talent. He's just starting to find his groove. I think that the Bengals, now that they have a win under their belt, they're going to play with a little more confidence, a little more swagger. They do have some really tough matchups coming up. I think they play the Ravens and, I don't know, probably the Steelers or someone like that coming up soon. So Higgins leads his team in yards per reception. He's second in receiving yards, third in targets. That target share is going to grow with A.J. Green struggling. I believe this week, this is off the top of my head, Higgins had 20% of the team's targets and Green only had 15% of the team's targets. So that is going to go down. What is great about this so far is that Joe Burrow is throwing the shit out of the ball. He has the second most attempts in the league. He is just going to throw the ball all around the yard every single week. That means lots of chances for work for T. Higgins. I love this guy. I think he needs to be on your team. His ownership percentage is kind of high in the number I quoted you because I feel like Flea Flicker is going to have more dynasty leagues than an ESPN or a Yahoo or an NFL. So don't be afraid. Go and look for T. Higgins. Don't assume that because it's 45% owned that he's owned in your league. The players you play with aren't that smart.
So far, AJ Green has 33 targets and Boyd has 34 to T. Higgins 22.
Yes.
But you're right that he is.
That's sort of early season depth.
You're right that he's trending average because it's 6, 9, and 7 in weeks 2, 3, and 4. I think that all three wide receivers can have value on a team where Joe Burrow is getting better and Joe Mixon is a good running back.
Joe Mixon if he's going to play like he played last week, it almost reminds me of the Vikings, which we'll get to in a few minutes, where the opposing teams have to focus on that first. And that just makes things even better for your passing game guys.
But again, it's kind of like, so you have to understand that if you have T. Higgins on your team, it's like sort of a boom or bust WR3 that could do really well or not at all.
Oh, yeah, he is not like a high floor guy at any point in his career.
You may not want to start him, but he's, again, depth lineup for you on your team. And in Dynasty is a great pickup.
Oh, he's great to have in Dynasty. I'm sure he's owned in Dynasty leagues, but maybe try to trade for him? I don't know.
So catch rate.
Maybe right now isn't the greatest time, but he could just get better and it'll be more expensive later.
Yes. Catch rate 55%, whereas Boyd is at 82%. AJ Green is at 42%. The reason why AJ Green has had lower targets is because he hasn't really had chemistry with Burrow. So what we're going to see is either a separation of Green having less and less and Higgins having more, or Burrow working better with all of the wide receivers, and then a lot of boomer bust weeks from those 2 or 3 guys, where we're looking at right now the number one guy every week being Tyler Boyd.
Sure. I think what we're going to see is Tyler Boyd staying on top, and then T. Higgins sort of filling in that A.J. Green role, being the dominant number 2.
Wow. Well, I think that's a lot, but I do agree that T. Higgins is valuable and is worth rostering, so it's a good waiver pick.
And he's my favorite pickup this week. We'll see about next week.
I thought you were into Schultz.
And wide receiver. No, obviously Tanyan would be the best pickup this week.
But Higgins is 6'4", 216, and he is no slouch. What you want is that guy who's exactly like that.
He looks like a tight end on the field because he wears number 85. And apparently, like, there's a handful of wide receivers left that wear the numbers in the 80s now. Almost everyone wears numbers in the teens at wide receiver.
You know, I've never really been familiar with how the numbering system works. We should do a whole show on that. It's pretty weird. Because you don't have to follow it all the time.
No, you kind of do. So linemen, like offensive linemen, have to have like numbers in the 50s and 60s. Linebackers have to have numbers in the 50s and 40s. Defensive backs have numbers in the 30s and 20s. So there's some overlap in there. Like running backs also wear numbers in the 20s and the teens. Quarterbacks have like low numbers, same with kickers. Mm-hmm. Defensive linemen have the highest numbers around. So you're never going to find a running back wearing number 99 unless it's a guy who started out at the lineman. So I don't think it's like very strict. It's not like the NFL is going to come to the team and say, you have to change this player's number.
Well, my point. So they don't really have to follow it.
It's tradition. You're right. They don't have to follow it because all the wide receivers changed to numbers in the teens.
Well, I don't know enough about it. So
I don't think that was a thing before 10 years ago.
So if you don't have to follow, then why do people follow it? It's very strange.
I believe some of it has to be followed so that the refs can tell who is where, who is supposed to be where, what they need to look for, stuff like that.
One of those things like a certain percentage of players have to adhere to a rule while the other ones don't? Like, that's crazy stuff.
This is a crazy... Okay, off the top of my head, my guess would be that the linemen have to wear the numbers that, you know, in their range. Because there are refs that only watch the linemen for holding, for false starts, crap like that. So, like you said, we could probably do a whole show on this.
Yeah, we don't have to get into it now.
But we're going to continue the show on Scott Miller.
But it's an interesting topic.
Of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is 29% owned. I recommend an 8% FAV bid on him. He is definitely trending up in several categories. Receptions, targets, fantasy points. The Bucs keep running into injuries. There's going to be a lot of playing time for Scott Miller.
You got to call him Scotty.
I feel like because he is not listed as Scotty everywhere, he may not be a fan of Scotty.
Do you call him Mitch Trubisky Mitchell Trubisky?
I actually was reading a thing from last year earlier today when I was trying to think of what we should cover today. And it was like, well, the least I can do for Mitch Trubisky is call him Mitchell because that's what he wants to be called. But I believe that he softened on that and said, go ahead and call me Mitch.
Yeah, Soft Mitch. That's his name.
That is definitely what he is right about now. He's playing against He's playing against Limp Nick. They're playing with Limp Nick.
Limp Nick? Oh, that's a horrible nickname. Oh.
Well, when you have the other nickname, when you play bad, you're Limp Nick.
Poor Limp Nick.
So, on to TB12. He threw 5 touchdowns last week to 5 different players. He's never done that in his career. Tom Brady is still Tom Brady occasionally. What can I say?
So
I hate the guy, but you have to recognize talent.
The best quarterback ever to play the game?
Fine.
He said fine. All right.
So Miller's going to see plenty of targets because Chris Godwin is going to be out probably for this next week. Mike Evans seems to be nursing an injury, maybe a different injury every week, but at least one every single week.
He's playing the old in-out, in-out.
That's right. So this week, I don't think that it's necessarily a great matchup for Scott Miller. However, Tom Brady is a co-owner of the Bears franchise. So perhaps it will work out in the Buccaneers' favor. If you're a person who likes to place wagers on a game in a state where it is legal to do so, I may recommend you placing money on the Buccaneers' side.
That's a lot of qualifications there for that statement.
I would never want to encourage illegal gambling, Dave. I'm not saying call up your bookie who lives in Illinois.
Hold on,
because it's now legal here.
Before you tuned into this stream, did you guys all accept the terms and conditions? Because there's a long TOS that I need you all to accept.
Oh, we got some number. We got some number stuff here.
Okay.
So Troy, who OG member of Drink 5, thank you, Troy, for the help here. Players who wear number 50 through 79 are, by rule,
this is crowd participation.
Prohibited from catching or touching forward passes if their team is in possession of the ball, may not line up in a position that allows them to. And I was reading this and thinking, but, next message, unless explicitly indicated to the referee during a tackle-eligible play. Number 79 is eligible. You'll hear that. Especially more now.
Yeah, they have to make a
blare the crowd noise into the TV,
and they have to make
reason.
like a symbol, something to say that they're eligible.
They have to go to them and they have to report, and then they have to line up in a position like the tight end position or the fullback position. Usually, that's where they wind up.
Which is, did you see the other day? I forget what game it was, but one of them, the whole team sort of guarded against them, the other team seeing who was lining up for eligibility.
Oh, cool!
It was really neat. So
don't the refs announce the number?
They do, but they don't have to do it like right away. So the team built like a wall, and then the guy came up and announced it to the ref, and then the ref kind of said it to the other team, but like they were already snapping. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's tricky.
So they had no idea it was happening.
That Andy Reid's team?
Maybe.
Andy sounds like something the Chiefs would do.
Andy Reid's pretty good with like the old crazy football stuff.
Yeah. That's great. So thank you, Troy, for that insight into the numbers that football players wear.
Is that straight from the the rules of the NFL?
I would imagine that this comes from Wikipedia.
Unless explicitly
all
indicated.
knowledge stems from Wikipedia now. And you know what? I can live with that.
For now.
That's a different podcast for the off season.
Until Wikipedia is sponsored by someone or owned by someone.
Well, it is owned by someone. And it's sponsored by all of us because he asks us for money every year.
All things are owned by someone.
That's very deep, Dave. I'm 13 and this is deep.
This is for our politics podcast, which doesn't exist and will never exist.
It will happen in 1 week, in 1 month.
1 month from now, whenever.
Oh, last year, or in 2016, we did the podcast on election night.
Oh, yeah.
And we had the good discipline to not look up the results until after the show ended.
You know, there are a bunch of old podcasts on Drink 5, so you can look them up if you're interested on myriad topics. And I really do...
there's dozens of podcasts that have nothing to do with football.
Yeah, so we would appreciate it if anybody wanted to go in and check out some of those. The cool thing about those is that they are not really... time sensitive in general. Some of them are more than others, like cryptocurrency, for example. But there's a lot of other stuff like
the drones. There's a lot of new stuff with drones.
Yeah, so go check them out.
But it's still interesting. And if you wanted to watch Daredevil or Better Call Saul or The Americans, we did at least a season of all those shows. I think.
But getting back to what works here,
Tim Patrick of Denver, 8% owned. Look at that transition. I'll give you a whiplash.
Mr. Patrick.
I recommend only a 3% bid on this. He's a deep league option, really. But he has all the signs you want when you look for players to pick up on the waiver, because you want the potential. You want the guy who's gonna be good, and you want to get rid of the guy who is becoming bad. So he's trending up on a team that has an injury above him on the depth chart. Cortland Sutton is out for the time being. It's really tough to tell how long people are going to be out this year with injury, but I'm going to say it's going to be a while. So he has increased his receptions each of the last 3 weeks, along with his yardage and his fantasy points. He scored a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks. You've got Brett Rippon filling in at least for another week on the Broncos, and him and Patrick have a bit of a downfield rapport. Rippon does seem to want to throw the ball downfield. Whether or not he is any good at it is still up in the air, but he likes to throw the ball downfield. He did so a bunch against the Jets. Unfortunately for the Broncos, they're going to play New England next week. They're going to smother them on the pass defense. Patrick is not a good start next week. However, I like him as a bench stash if you can't get any of the previously mentioned players, and wait till he has a few easier games to take a flyer on him. So that's all the wide receivers. We'll jump over to running backs. If you were at the podcast at 9 p.m., unlike us, then you saw a photo of Damian Harris running wild against the Chiefs last night. He is owned in 43% of leagues. I recommend a 15 to 18% bid on him because he was quite impressive on Monday Evening Football. He put up a perfect 10.0, meaning 10 points exactly, 100 yards on 17 carries. No targets in the passing game, but that's a good average. I think that that's enough to keep him in early down work for the Patriots for the time being. They have lost Sony Michel to the IR. That happened on Monday afternoon, if I remember correctly. So here's the thing. When you start running backs for the Patriots, you are going to go gray. You are going to pull your hair out. You are going to bash your head against the wall. You're going to curse Bill Belichick's name. But you are not going to drop these guys because there is value there. So, here's what you need to expect. Damien Harris is going to get early down work. James White is going to get all of the third down work, 100% of it. However, James White was the best running back on the team last night, even with Damien Harris running well, because White was getting first downs. White was making plays when they needed them. He still only saw the field on third down. So, you can count on early down work going to someone other than James White. James White getting all of the third down work. It's going to be a lot of Damien Harris. We're going to sprinkle in a little bit of the Rex Burkhead. That's what I expect going forward. So you're going to have games where Rex Burkhead is the guy who scores 2 touchdowns and Damien Harris gets 80 yards. And you're yelling at the TV. And you're cursing Bill Belichick. And you're ripping off your sleeves because you don't understand what's going on.
You're ripping off your sleeves. And you're putting on a weird bird mask.
Yes, exactly. Because you're sick and it's the year 1702. So anyways.
Bill Belichick is just so much fun.
That being said, Damien Harris is a guy with a decent floor and a high ceiling. Because he may be the guy to get 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's going to happen for him this season. You want to be on the right side of that. So if you need help at running back because you're missing Christian McCaffrey still, because you've lost any number of other running backs that are out, because Aaron Jones is on bye this week, then Damien Harris, not such a bad option.
So I was just talking to one of our listeners earlier. This is David from Twitter, and he's been a listener for a while too. And I mentioned that Harris was a good option, maybe the top option this week as far as running backs are concerned. And he said even White getting all the receiving and the Belichick factor, he could get 2 carries this week. And I said, yep, he could. That's what you're dealing with here. And there's a couple other teams that are similar, and I think you put it well. So you just have to accept the risk factor and understand that your guy could get 100 or 2.
Look, you even have to consider when Cam comes back. Okay, Cam Newton is the goal line back on that team, so he's going to get some of those carries. But Damien Harris is probably already going to give some of those up to Rex Burkhead. So perhaps it's not going to bite into or vulture as many touchdowns as you think because they were vultured already.
Yeah. Well, let's fill up our shot glasses for another shot for Vince.
Okay.
And move on to the next player.
It is Vince's birthday. Happy birthday, Vince.
Is that all of them, or you still got some more guys to go over here?
Oh, there are several more guys to go over. Justin Jackson, I'll try to speed these up a little bit. Of the LA Chargers, he is 22% owned. I recommend a 10 to 12% bid on him. So he didn't produce a whole lot on the limited work that he had, but he's been able to produce in the past when he's given the opportunity. Last year, he had a decent yards per carry at 6.9. The year before, his rookie season, he showed that he was effective in the passing game. Here's a couple reasons why I like Jackson. First of all, Eckler's out. That's sort of a prerequisite here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about him at all. I think that Kelly is going to see the biggest boost at first. However, Kelly has lost a fumble in each of the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so it's questionable. He could take control of the backfield, or he could just fall into nothingness.
If he gives up another fumble, you could see Jackson for the rest of the game.
Well, what coach who wants his job is going to allow a running back to just fumble over and over? They're none of them.
Especially a coach that just gave up a 24-7 lead.
Yeah, so Joshua Kelly has a chance, but Jackson's going to be involved.
Exactly. They have shown but on the Chargers that they are going to use two running backs pretty much no matter what. Jackson is going to be well in that rotation, and he can see a much larger share of that rotation if Kelly stumbles at all. So if you've got Kelly, if you've already picked him up, he is owned in too many leagues to make him a waiver pickup. But if he's available, grab him over Justin Jackson. Giarnis Johnson of Cleveland is only 2% owned. I recommend a 13 to 15% bump in him, and this is why. With Nick Chubb headed to the IR, I think that Giarnis Johnson is going to fill the Nick Chubb role. I think that he's going to be the guy to get the early down work, the early game work, and be given the opportunity to play a lot, whereas they're going to keep Kareem Hunt in the same role that they have him in right now. I don't think that they're going to shift Kareem Hunt to Nick Chubb's role, because what Kareem Hunt is doing for them is very good. It's working well. And I think that they can slide Giarnis Johnson into the Nick Chubb role. So you're going to see both guys get plenty of work, but it's going to be Kareem Hunt still in the third down situations, in the hurry-up situations, in the late in the half situations. And I think you're going to see Giarnis Johnson, because he had only 13 carries, but 95 yards. So he's just a good, plain old runner of the ball.
Yeah, but they're still going to trust Kareem Hunt more than Johnson. Because
it's true. Kareem Hunt is a guy with a pedigree, and Giarnis Johnson is an undrafted free agent.
Yeah. So,
but I think you're going to see more than.
But
you
Cleveland
think.
runs the ball a lot.
They really do.
So you will get your 10+ touches from Johnson.
They are the best running team in the league.
That's what
they run the ball the most. Sorry, they run the ball the second most. They get the most out of it because they have the most yardage. They have the most rushing touchdowns. Owning their second RB is a must-have. You have to have that guy on a team.
Yeah.
Keyshawn Vaughn, thankfully, my dynasty first-round pick has come through to be at all relevant in a tiny way. So that's just a personal... I'm not salty at all, as I've said earlier tonight. So on Tampa Bay, he is 41% owned. That number is high because of dynasty leagues. FAB value that I put on him is 5 to 8% this week. So he had a tough start to his rookie campaign. He had an injury in the preseason. He tested positive for COVID in the preseason. He basically didn't have a training camp with the Buccaneers. Now that Leonard Fournette and, as of the game last week, LaShawn McCoy are sidelined with injuries, there's more room for Vaughn to show off. I believe that one of the third-string running backs just went out, suspended for performance-enhancing drugs or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if the health situation does not change, then Vaughn is the number 2 guy there behind Ronald Jones. And I think that it's important to see that he is connecting with Tom Brady for a touchdown in the passing game, that Tom Brady wants to throw it to him. If Tom Brady likes this guy, then Tom Brady is going to get this guy in the lineup. It is going to happen, and Vaughn might be his guy. So put him in as a bench stash. You're not starting him yet, but this week, as I said earlier, in an emergency situation, you may want to go ahead and start him. The Bucs are playing, as we said, the Bears on Thursday night, and Tom Brady owns the frickin' Bears. So, if in an emergency, if you really, really have nobody to start, then Keyshawn Vaughn isn't the worst option. If you're a bettor and you like the player yardage props, take a look at what they're giving to Keyshawn Vaughn. I especially like any sort of receptions over 4. Anything over about 20 or 25 receiving yards. I think both of those are going to hit this week. So I don't know what their lines are. I'm not going to spend the time logging into FanDuel at the moment because it takes too long. But if you like the player prop lines, take a look at those. At quarterback, you got Teddy Bridgewater. He is 42% owned. FAAB value 5%. He is legitimately trending up over the last 3 weeks. He's played very well. Now in week 5, he gets to face the Falcons, who have essentially surrendered 30 fantasy points to the quarterback position of their opponent every week. I have to make those qualifiers because it's like, well, Aaron Rodgers scored like 29.88 points. And in week 3, Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles combined for 30 points. But other than that, they've given up 30 points a week to the quarterback every week. So Teddy Bridgewater, perfect position to have a great week. If you have Aaron Rodgers and you are a smart person who doesn't keep a backup quarterback on their team, Teddy Bridgewater is your guy. There you go. I think that week 6 will be rough, but then he has another good matchup in week 7 against the Saints. They give him like the 4th or 5th most points to opposing quarterbacks.
And by that time, they'll have Christian McCaffrey.
You put the words right in my mouth.
Choo, choo, choo.
So, Kirk Cousins of Minnesota, he is 64% owned. I only bring him up because of his awesome matchups coming up. Not only is he starting to gel with Justin Jefferson, but he's loving Adam Thielen. The running game is working very well. They have to focus on the running game first in Minnesota. And Kirk Cousins gets to play Atlanta and Seattle. Seattle and then Atlanta, to be specific. The number 2 and number 1 teams in terms of giving up fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So how can you get more of a tempting matchup than that? If Kirk Cousins is still available in your league, a 67% bid is what I would recommend. Perhaps if you have to start him this week, go as high as 10%. Remember, if you're just taking flyers on these guys, I would go with my recommended values. If you need these players, I would go a little bit higher. Make sure you go to drink5.com. You can see everything I have to say about all these guys. You can also see where Dave ranks them in our weekly rankings. There's other such things to check out.
Other such things.
Such as?
I'm totally into other such things. So Jason has a column every week, which I really enjoy, and that column is called what?
Statistically Insignificant.
That's great.
I like to find crazy stats.
And we have a column from Sean Foss, who's available on Twitter, and he always has such great things to say about rookies. Also horrible things. It depends on how the rookies are doing, really, right? It's the rookie report. And every single week he goes through every single rookie who's viable in any way in fantasy, whether that be to start, to sit on your bench, on the wire, or even those to start in DFS situations that are extreme, trying to make money off of gambling sites like FanDuel or DraftKings. We also have Tad Bukowski, who has just recently won our Dynasty League. Congratulations, Tad, if you're watching. And he does a confidence pool kind of a column every single week. We have other contributors as well.
Not kind of. Exactly a confidence pool column.
Exactly a confidence pool.
Sean Foss, frequent contributor, especially in the off season. He does a rookie report.
Just mention Sean.
Well, I was talking to Matt.
Yes, that's fine.
There's an audience to satisfy here, Dave.
Yeah, that's great. It's fantastic. So we're gonna do a little shot for Vince, and Vince again was a contributor and will be in the future to Drink 5
and a guest on the podcast.
So we'll have him on here later this year.
Yeah.
So cheers to Vince for your birthday, man.
Happy birthday, Vince.
In our Dynasty League, one of them.
This is the very same that we just brought up.
I've been thinking about starting some kind of a league next year.
If we're talking about our Dynasty League, we're talking about the same league.
Yes. There's only one R Dynasty.
There's only one that we co-commissioned.
Right. Which I recommend co-commissioning if you can get along with
100%.
someone.
I'm the commissioner of a bunch of leagues. This is my favorite one because I don't have to do all the work. It's fucking great.
Yeah, you split it up, But you have to get along with the other person, otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah. You have to be able to sit down during the off season for 3 consecutive Wednesday nights and talk the entire time about what could happen because of COVID.
That's right.
And then come up with a laundry list of things that have nothing to do with what actually happens.
You have to do that. Yes. Well, cheers again, Vince. Was that all of the waiver wire picks?
That's all of them.
So I gotta say, great article, well researched. It's available on drink5.com if you guys want to just read one of those again and see exactly what Jason is thinking. I back up the vast majority of what he's thinking. Of course, I can't get behind every single thing, but nobody can, right?
If you're gonna part with me on some of this, I would guess that you are not agreeing with Leviska Schultz. And perhaps my take on Giarnis Johnson.
I don't want to get into that. I think everyone that you picked is a good enough player to pick up as a speculative pick at the very least.
Everyone I mentioned is better than someone on your lineup.
That's not necessarily true. So
okay, some people are in a league where they have an amazing team.
Well, I think what we have to look at is the vast variety of people that might come and listen to our podcast and come to our site. So you might have a 10-team league where you only have 15 players on the roster total. And in that case, I can see a situation where no one that you mention is better than what they have on their roster. But that's not, I think, the majority of the people like you guys that really come and see our website and seek out these articles. You're here for a different reason, right? You're here because you're in a 12-team league. You're in a competitive 10-team dynasty with 26 different positions available. You know, it's difficult.
I'm here for the beer.
He's here for the beer.
Yeah.
Let's move on. So I would love to do podcasts just on one singular subject. It would be awesome. Maybe we can get to that a little bit later this year. But let's move on to Fantasy Fool's Gold. And I have in the past included 3, 4, 5 players. This particular week, I'm just going to focus on one because we don't have a lot of time.
Okay.
Jason has been very verbose on the waiver, and I thought it was awesome. What did you guys think? Let us know.
I had a lot to say.
Let us know in the comments or email Jason at drink5.com and let him know after you played those guys that you picked up if you did a good job. Or a bad job. I want you to get an email that's like
you've ruined my fantasy year.
Well, you get one that says you made me win a tough matchup, and one that says I hate you. I needed that money.
If I get both of those emails, then I'll be pretty even.
They cancel each other out.
Yeah, they totally cancel each other out.
So my Fantasy Fool's Gold is Todd Gurley, running back, Atlanta. Again, shout out to Vince, birthday Vince. In week 4, Gurley really stepped it up, 2 touchdowns against the Packers. But his stats, they're still down in the dumps, right? So far this year, he's rushed for 254 yards. That's 63.5 per game. Todd Gurley, 63 yards per game. So good. And it's only the touchdowns that are keeping him up in that sort of RB2 position, carrying fantasy points to allow for a start on fantasy rosters. Because if you had a guy that would occasionally score a touchdown but only have 60 yards, you would not start him except for maybe a flex position. That is where Todd Gurley really exists.
Why are they not throwing him the ball?
Well, they have Brian Hill and they have Ito Smith, and they tend to throw Brian Hill the ball.
But he has 9 receiving yards on the season.
Look,
Todd Gurley, when he was on the Rams, could catch the ball just fine.
You know the reason. You remember back on the Rams, Todd Gurley had some issues with arthritis of the knee and some other things like that. He has had, I believe the stat was, watching the game last night, more carries or touches than anyone else that has been in the league at his position for as long as he has. Since he started. And he has simply been overworked.
In his 5-year career, he has 1,552 carries, which is an average. Of course, this is his 6th season of over 300 per year.
Right. So Atlanta is just working him as much as they can, but they're cooling him off with a little bit of Brian Hill and Ito Smith during the games. And I just don't see a reality where Todd Gurley is out there long enough and for as many plays as required to be a running back 1 or 1.5, which I just made up. I think he's going to be an RB2 with touchdown dependent, but what he really is a flex play now. And so Fantasy Fool's Gold, Todd Gurley. What I think anyone that has Todd Gurley should do is sell.
And you're not just pandering to the birthday boy because we had this conversation last night.
I am not.
All right.
So your thoughts on that, and we'll move to the cut list.
Look, I am a little bit biased because he won me a couple of fantasy leagues.
Oh, that's awesome. You have it on multiple leagues? You have Todd Gurley?
Not this year.
Oh, I see.
But in previous seasons, like in 2017, 2018.
Oh, well, then you should do the long
when he
goodbye.
was doing awesome.
Like the princess goodbye.
And
Todd Gurley,
it's hard to tell, like, which running backs are going to work for 4 years, which are going to work for 6 or 8 years, and which are going to work for 10 years.
You can't determine a Frank Gore. It's impossible.
It seems like Todd Gurley is only going to be the guy who works for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So perhaps the Rams got rid of him at the right time. They gave him a contract, but they decided, nope, we're getting rid of him.
Hey, but he's still scoring a ton of touchdowns. The point is,
he's always scored a lot of touchdowns.
It's not sustainable.
I don't know. Last year, he had 223 carries. He is on track for more than that. He had 12 touchdowns last year, rushing, another 2 receiving. So unless they're going to throw him the ball more, then I agree he's really taken a hit to his fantasy value.
Yep, because he's not doing like half of what he used to do.
He has 222 receptions in his career. 200, only 4 of them have come on the Falcons. Like, he needs more than 1 catch per game.
They're not going to throw him the ball.
You know, in 60 games, he had 4 catches a game, and now they're giving him 1 a game.
But we talk about trends, man. Like, it's not happening. It wasn't happening. It isn't happening. Not happening.
No, I understand, but I think it might turn around.
Okay, so sell Gurley to Jason. That's what we're talking about here.
I'll buy him low. I'm fine with that.
Sell.
I wouldn't be
buy.
buying low.
You can't buy low. He just scored 2 touchdowns.
Well, I'm not going to offer a lot for him.
We're literally connecting here. We're connecting Vince and Jason together.
Thank you.
Let me move on to the cut
list.
list.
Tell us who to cut this week. We did have a cut list question in the chat. Let's see if you hit the guy. I'll ask you if you pass him by.
I'm not going to hit that guy.
I didn't think you would.
We can talk about him right now.
But he might be on the bubble.
All right, we'll talk about when we get to running backs.
Okay.
So unless you want to go reverse like we did on yours.
No, that would really freak me out.
Okay, so let's start with my cuts. Quarterbacks. We're going to start with Carson Wentz. And
Wasn't he a cut last week?
No, he wasn't.
Oh.
Last week
he should have been.
Let me see if I still have it up.
I can get last week's cut.
I'm pretty sure Carson Wentz was like a maybe coming back next week kind of guy, you know?
Oh, interesting.
Look.
Oh, look at that. I do have your notes. Sorry, continue.
So Carson Wentz is averaging more interceptions than touchdowns per game this year. And
it sounds like he plays for one of the New York teams.
and there's no way that he does any better against Pittsburgh and Baltimore, which are his next 2 matchups. So the answer is, if you have Carson Wentz on your team, you can't sell him. You have to just drop him, cut your losses, pick another quarterback, get out of there, period. Jason, thoughts?
He was on your list last week.
Well, he's on the list this week, too.
Along with Drew Brees and Daniel Jones, cut them all. That's fine. I agreed with you last week. I agree with you this week.
You sure that wasn't week 3?
Carson Wentz.
Was it week 3?
Here's my notes, and I'm pretty sure that this was week 4's podcast.
All right. Well, then I agree with myself.
It is week 3. What the fuck? But this is from September 23rd. Well, I mean, you told us to cut him 2 weeks ago. Is that better or worse?
Cheers.
Oh, last week was DOS notes. Our emails are very easy to decipher. Clearly, who else are we cutting at quarterback?
And Baker Mayfield, who what?
Sorry.
Do you like Baker?
You just elicited a reaction from me. That's all.
Oh, he loves the Browns.
I love Baker Mayfield's commercials.
Baker Mayfield is a great guy on commercials. Horrible football player. Oh, Christ. So, he averages 182.25 passing yards and 1.75 touchdowns on the year. 14.17 fantasy points per game.
It's because they run the shit out of the ball.
Yeah, so don't play Baker Mayfield.
No, don't play him.
Ever.
No.
Like, he might throw the ball to Odell Beckham. He might have a good game, but the odds are that he won't.
He's going to throw the ball to Odell a lot.
It doesn't matter. He's not going to be as good as the top other 12 quarterbacks.
The 2 quarterbacks that I mentioned in waiver picks are way better than these 2.
So, do you disagree with that then? It hurts you a little bit, but you're like, Baker, goodbye.
All I said is you elicited a response. I didn't say that you were wrong.
I feel like based on how the Eagles are doing this year, you're soon to be an Eagles fan.
Oh, God, I really don't want that. At least all of the bad teams that I'm a fan of are small market teams. You're not going to catch me being a Jets fan anytime soon.
Oh, no.
It's like the Jaguars and the Bills a while back.
Oh, my God.
And the fucking Browns last year.
Well, here we are. So those two guys, I really don't think that they are worth rostering anymore. And I understand why someone would. Carson Wentz, certainly from years past, and Baker Mayfield, what a good a draft spot that he had, and such good players on his team. They just run, just like Jason said.
That's all they do.
Running back,
and they're really good at it, so they're going to keep doing it.
I'm looking at Jeff Wilson. So Jeff Wilson, love Jeff Wilson. I recommended him to you, and you started him 2 touchdowns 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but then last week, not 2 touchdowns.
Because they get Mostert back probably next week. We're not sure. But they still have McKinnon, who they're going to use the heck out of.
Yeah.
And he's starting to be that guy again that he was when they actually wanted him to be that guy. And Jeff Wilson, who is a really good sort of back of the line guy who will steal some touchdowns, is not going to get those opportunities when they have multiple people in front of him in line.
I think Wilson came in last week because McKinnon had to leave for a few series, and he just happened to get the touchdowns. And it's not like with C.J. Beathard or Nick Mullins that they're going to be driving down the field all day long.
Yeah.
So,
J.K. Dobbins, he's on the Baltimore Ravens. So this rookie
he's just a rookie. He's not a rookie.
He's a rookie. Has had 22 touches through 4 games. And the problem is the Ravens were trying to shuffle around and figure out who it was that was actually their lead back. And right now, it really looks like Mark Ingram is that guy based on how they're doing when they perform well. But you can still have him on your team. If you do, you just won't perform very well. You won't get a lot of fantasy points from J.K. Dobbins because he has had 36 yards from scrimmage per game. So do you want to start him? Go ahead. I would love to play against you. I just think that J.K. Dobbins in a redraft league does not belong on the roster of a team that wins the fantasy championship.
There is not enough offense on the Baltimore Ravens this year to support J.K. Dobbins.
Yep.
Unless he takes the place of Mark Ingram.
But it's not happening right now.
And that's not happening.
So it's
like Marquis Brown, set him aside. The only guys who you're really interested in are Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
And Ingram.
I've got Zach Moss as a cut. Buffalo Bills. It looks like, again.
That's the truth, Dave.
No. The truth is.
No, the truth is that you should cut Jack
Devin
Moss
Singletary.
Because of the truth.
Who has been awesome. And there is no reason why he will not be continued to be played by Buffalo Bills. He's on pace right now for 1,300 yards. 1,300 yards if he continues his
He's
pace.
Quietly one of the best players because I was unaware that he was doing very good.
Oh, my God. If you look at Devin Singletary right now, look up how much is he rostered on Flea Flicker Leagues.
Are you talking yards from scrimmage? He's got 326 through 4 games.
I'm not
1,300 yards would be the pace.
Can you look up
the Devin Singletary rostered?
Yeah, I'm just curious how many people own him in Flea Flicker Leagues. I'll move on to the next guy.
He is owned in 92% of leagues.
Yeah, so
including my Drink 5 team.
Do you have him?
I do. Last game, 16.11 points, averaging 11.7 on the season.
Did you start him?
I started Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor because I am rookie heavy on this team.
Jonathan Taylor.
I'm rookie drunk on this team.
Jonathan Taylor's just rough because I'm going to talk about Nyheim Hines right now, who is a cut.
Look at that transition.
He rushed 9 times for 24 yards in Week 4 over the Bears, and he had 3 catches for 8 yards. So Nyheim Hines, yeah, he's involved, but he's not involved enough to be fantasy relevant on your team that is trying to win the championship. And Jonathan Taylor, he had 17 carries. Hines had 9. So,
but how many carries did that other guy have that kept pissing me off?
The other guy. You're talking about Jordan Wilkins.
Yes.
And you remember Jordan Wilkins was a rookie the same year as Nyheim Hines was. And the funniest news from RotoWorld back in June of this year was that Jordan Wilkins might not even make the team. But he's had 9 rushes over the past
9 carries as well.
The past 3 weeks. So he's obviously right there in the shuffle along with all of them, which means that the Indianapolis Colts have decided that they are the New England Patriots and they are going to screw your running back selection on your fantasy team every single week.
And I was saying such nice things about the Indianapolis Colts all preseason.
All right, let's move on.
Look, as long as Jonathan Taylor gets 50% of the carries, the other two guys split the other 25. You can still start Jonathan Taylor, I guess.
So
let's just touch on the guy at running back who we're not cutting yet is Leonard Fournette, who was brought up in the chat room.
Yeah. I am not cutting yet. And what's the reason why you won't cut him yet?
Just because it's not the time yet.
Because you drafted him in the first round.
Well, I drafted him in the third round in a 12-team league. No, it was the fourth round, probably. I was at the end of that. Anyways, that's not important. The point is that he's hurt right now. When he comes back, he will still be the lead back until he is usurped by either Ronald Jones or Keyshawn Vaughn. That may not happen right away. It seems like they acquired him because they like what he does. And he has shown some good flashes this year on the Bucs. I wouldn't drop him just yet.
I would say
You
this.
have to be in a really short league to drop him.
If Fournette ends up on the IR or something like that, then there's no reason to have him on your team. But currently, when he could come back next week or the week after and take over all those carries, there is a reason to have him because Tampa Bay has a great offense. And whoever it is that's going to be the running back, or even if it's shared between two people, they have a possibility of having touchdowns and a lot of touches. So...
yeah, nowadays, like, anybody who doesn't go on the IR is going to be back in just a couple weeks. Or they're an important enough name to go ahead and let them sit on the team for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Who else you got?
So Brandon Cooks. We're talking about wide receivers now. So there are a lot of wide receivers in Houston, and I'm going to sort of hold for a little bit what my interpretation of the Houston Texans fantasy offense will be going forward until I see what happens after Bill O'Brien is now gone as the GM and head coach.
Bye-bye.
I think they'll do a little bit better. I feel like teams tend to do better after that, but we'll see. The point is that he just simply he put up a 0. He has 3 weeks of 25 or fewer yards, and we're not really sure what's going on. Desean Watson is still looking like an okay quarterback, but they just look like they don't know what they're doing out there.
Totally concur with dropping Brandon Cooks. I didn't like him going into the season. I don't see what role he's going to fill there.
But your opinion about him based on concussions, etc., doesn't really that is not relevant here. It's just about.
Is it though?
No, it's just about how are they using anyone because they have no offense that makes any sense.
Sure. Dropping Brandon Cooks has almost nothing to do with Brandon Cooks, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Fine.
But, okay, Will Fuller is the guy who's going to score points on that offense without DeAndre Hopkins in it.
You know what? We don't know what's going to happen once someone else is calling the plays.
I still know Will Fuller and Deshaun Watson are going to score points.
I mentioned earlier that Bill O'Brien wanted to take over the play calling, and I believe Romeo Crennel, the defensive coordinator, is taking over the team. Generally speaking, they don't just swap out all of the assistant coaches. Perhaps it'll be the same offensive coordinator still, which is not good, which means not much is going to change.
Yeah, we'll see. But I mean...
or maybe the offensive coordinator wasn't allowed to do some of the things he wanted to do, and now he will.
Being that Bill O'Brien was both the GM and the coach makes me think he had the stranglehold on the team in general, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So...
yep, that's just going to ring. Sorry, everybody. If you're watching the show and calling me, then I'll answer it later.
It's going to ring.
I don't know where my phone is. I put it on silent and I moved it away and it's still ringing. I apologize for the inconvenience. Let's go on to AJ.
We can probably hear it more than anyone else can.
I'm sure that's right. Everyone probably could not hear that at all.
And Jason's phone is ringing, everyone, just so you know.
Yeah, that was my phone ringing after I put it on silent.
That's the fun stuff about live broadcasts, is that our phones can ring. It's in his backpack. Basically, AJ Green has had 14 catches for 119 yards. Now, Tyler Boyd has been really good, and we just talked about T. Higgins earlier.
Yes.
And those two guys have been doing well with Joe Burrow. I don't really think that Joe Burrow can sustain 3 fantasy football wide receivers.
He does throw the ball enough, but A.J. Green is not going to be one of them.
Well, I don't know if you can decide that right now because he didn't play at all last year.
It's not up to me.
Of course
but...
it's not. I'm just saying that, of course, people can change throughout the year, but right now I'm not putting A.J. Green in my starting lineups. I don't think that's a smart decision until he shows that he can be a guy again that is going to get 5-6 targets per game for actual yards that give us points.
I get behind dropping A.J. Green.
So he's on my cut list, and that's all there is to it. Anthony Miller, which is a tough one for a lot of people, especially in the area that I am since I live in Chicagoland. Anthony Miller, he has 33.3 yards per game. Get rid of him. Bye.
Woo!
Darius Slayton.
Daniel Jones as a quarterback.
I am not a fan of Darius Slayton. I have never been. But he is such a boom and bust person. He recently had this crazy game that was
week 1. I think he had 2 touchdowns, right?
6 for 102 and 2. And
I believe Daniel Jones only has 3 touchdowns on the year.
I mean, the Giants are just horrible, and that's really the number one reason. It's not about Darius Slayton as much as it is about Daniel Jones and the Giants offense, who don't have Saquon Barkley.
I'm glad that you can identify the correct grammar
on the fly
after all these drinks. So I talked about in my column on Monday, the statistically insignificant, about how bad the teams in the Meadowlands are.
That feels significant, though.
MetLife Stadium. They are 0-8 this year. The New York Guardians are the last team to win there. They play for the XFL.
That's not a team.
That league isn't even a league anymore.
The XFL doesn't exist.
I think that the New York Guardians might be the next team to win in the Meadowlands. MetLife Stadium. Pardon me.
Gotcha.
Anyways, they only have 8 touchdowns between them. It's insanely terrible.
Yeah.
They have 9 interceptions between them, though.
Well, I have one more guy to talk about. That's a tight end. Logan Thomas is the guy that I'm talking about, who is so heralded and hyped, and we talked to him about him multiple weeks about how he was not that interesting. On Washington, he did well, but has had a clear trend down to targets that were 8, 9, 7, and 4. Yardage that was 37, 26, 31, and 8. And touchdowns, he scored 1 in week 1 and then 0 afterwards.
I can smell the stats from here.
So Logan Thomas, who used to be a quarterback and was converted to a tight end for the Washington Redskins. Washington has so many problems. You do not need to involve yourself with this one and just get rid of it.
I mean, does he have like a high ownership percentage? I'll be terrified to find out if he does.
He did. Week 2 was a huge waiver wire pickup, and because he still had 4 receptions in week 2 and 3, that was high.
He is the 35th most added player in the last 3 days.
But week 4 is...
What is wrong with people?
Week 4... well, that's because of this week. Week 4, he only had 1 reception for 8 yards and 4 targets, was unable to catch the things that he was thrown. It was rough for him.
Cut Logan Thomas.
So get rid of him.
I said that last week. Off air.
Aha.
Yeah.
And that's it for us. I think for tight end, wide receiver, running back, quarterback for the cut list. And
everybody, thank you for joining us. Thanks for the people who listen live and participated in the chat. That's always encouraged and welcome. And we thank you for that. Thank you for giving us questions. If you have any questions you want to send us during the week, tweet us at Drink5. Send an email to jason@drink5.com or dave@drink5.com. We also have an Instagram page that you can follow. I have no idea how to find that. I've never been on Instagram in my life.
This guy.
But I'm told it's a thing. And it can be occasionally memey.
I would love to educate him on how social media works, but he's afraid of it.
I am terrified.
Anyway, just look for Drink 5 wherever you are, DRINKFIVE, and you'll find us. And we love you guys. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Happy birthday, Vince.
Happy birthday, Vince.